So now that our motor is fully installed and in there rock solid, now we're ready to finally go on to the next step. That took quite a bit of time there. But finally now we can go on to our next step here and install our controller and our heatsink. We're going to be using an air-cooled system on this one. So we want to keep the controller as close to the motor as possible. We also want to have the maximum cooling possible here by using our heatsink. So I'm thinking this is about where our condenser unit used to be. The air conditioning condenser was right about in that location there. So we have room. I think if we just put that there, right there, center on our grill, we'll have maximum airflow coming in, which is what we want. And then we have plenty of room for the controller to be mounted facing inwards. And then that way our connectors will be facing inwards. These three connectors right here have to go directly to our three connectors on the top of the motor there. So here's what our controller is looking like, mounted to our heatsink. So what I've done is I've drilled a few holes out here where I anticipate our strapping is going to be. Basically 8 holes here, all the way around the perimeter. And I used some heatsink compound that was provided with the whole kit here. So I used that, applied that to both sides of the heatsink and the controller. And then I mounted it with the bolts provided straight in, and then I used some thread lock to make sure that that stays put. So basically this guy's ready to go now. So it weighs about 20 pounds or so. It's not exactly light, but we already know we're going to be putting it right in this position here. I have plenty of room. So I've now got the motor here connected to our controller, and our controller is now secured a bit further with some additional wiring. Also, this wire is a thick wire. It's very, although it is pliable, it is relatively rigid once you have enough connections connected. So it's additional support in addition to the wire. So it all kind of works together like a big web and kind of just holds itself in place really nicely. So it's actually in here really securely. And so what I've also done is I've gone ahead and done our wiring. So I connected our backpack to our front, and that's what's running right there, the orange wire. I was able to use a lot of the existing screw holes in the back there in this position right over here. I just fabricated some little metal clamps right here and then just screwed right into the existing. So that's what I did over there. And then everywhere else I just used nylon tie wraps. I love these things, they're so good, they're so useful. I just need to go back and clip off the excess here, and then that's pretty much done here. So this is our negative wire here running into our controller right here. And that's the positive wire running up to the last module of that pack, which is right here. And so that's wiring in now. So that connects that and completes the 96 volt circuit for the backpack right here. So all we have to do now is we only have one last circuit to do here for the fat wire, and that is our two positives right here. So this is our front pack positive and this is our rear pack positive. So all we have to do now is join these together, run them over here to the front. I'll be installing basically a disconnect, but it's also a fuse, so it's kind of a additional safety feature here. So what's going to allow us to do is we'll be able to just simply pull this out when we want to do a quick service disconnect, or if there's ever an accident or anything, any kind of safety thing, that's something that somebody will be able to easily disconnect it. And then it itself is a fuse, so if there is any kind of catastrophe, any kind of short or anything, it would basically burn out anyway. So it's just an added extra safety feature. So we're going to basically mount it right about here. We'll have our positive come into there, and then from there it will go down to our connection down there, and that will basically complete our fat wiring here. Okay, so here's what our battery packs are looking like now. As I mentioned before, we've got our rear pack that meets our front pack here. So these basically converge together here 2 wires are in there, and then 1 wire comes out, and that wire goes to our fuse, our disconnect right here, and then that goes out to our coil, and from the coil it goes down to our controller. Now, one thing that's interesting about this coil, I don't believe this was the case with my first car, but apparently it is now, that this is a reduction coil. So supposedly we have a, we do have a 96 volt pack, but supposedly this coil reduces it down to 48 volts for some reason. So it reduces it to 48 volts, goes in to the controller, and then somehow that uses it and utilizes it in some sort of manner that gets us back to 96 volt. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but anyway, I've been assured that that's what it's supposed to do. So that's what because I actually inquired about that. I was wondering why I have a 48 volt coil on a 96 volt system, but that's what they told me. So anyway, we'll find out if that's true or not. Anyway, that concludes our hard wiring here. So we've got all the thick stuff done. All the big fat wires are done. Finally, so we got that done. So that's a big step forward here. So in fact, we're so close to being done now, it's almost ridiculous. All we have to do now is hook up our DC to DC converter. That's a 96 volt. So we're going to have to tap into the circuit somewhere. So probably this would be a good place to do it right here at the coil, since it's after the disconnect. That way we can pull the disconnect, and that shuts everything off, because we don't want anything to be on. If we pull that disconnect, we want nothing to be on at that point. So probably be a good point to connect it would be here. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then it's really just the wiring kit that comes with the whole system. I mean, we've got a whole wiring harness that comes with it. A lot of it's actually labeled this time, which is good, because last time it was not. I had to figure it all out on my own, but this time some of this stuff is labeled. So that will be plugging into right here, into our controller. So all the little wires, essentially, that's what we have to do now, and that should be, well, it's going to be a fair amount of work, but once we do have that done, we'll be running those wires into the car here, and basically we'll be able to wire, bring all those wires in. Some of them are to some gauges we'll be adding, all that kind of stuff, and then sometime before or after that, we need to put our final connections for our heated seats here, put our seats back in. And before we do that, we need to vacuum up in here. So I'm going to do that next, actually. I'm going to vacuum this up because we're getting so close now. So we're going to be pretty close to getting this thing wrapped up here. So anyway, that's where we're at. Okay, so here's what it's looking like now. So I purchased a house, and I'm going to be moving now. So this is going to be put on hold yet again, even though we're like about 95, maybe 96, 97% of the way there. Unfortunately, I was hoping to get it done before the move, but there's actually no choice now, so I'm going to have to do it. But it is a move forward, so that's a good thing. So anyway, we will be picking this up later on. So the time is late December 2021. So we're just getting this thing ready for transport right now. So I've got this sealed up right here, and I've got those water pipes sealed up. Make sure that the power steering clamps are tight. There was a little bit of leakage there, so making sure that everything is good, ready for transport. Everything's tight, ready to go, because it's next time I touch this, it's gonna be putting it on a transport carrier, and then it's gonna be traveling down some 1,200 miles or so to the south. Okay, so we're back on the project now at our new location, and I'm very excited because we were very close to the end there, to finishing before, but I did notice we have a few other things to do here. So one thing is tires. So I just ordered these about a week ago. I was actually able to find some tires, which is hard enough in itself. Before, 9 months ago when I was looking at this, they were almost impossible to find. Now there actually are a couple brands, no name brand nevertheless, but still, at least they're DOT rated. I mean, some of the stuff I was finding was like trailer tires which are completely useless. But these are actually dot spec'd here. They actually have tread wear ratings, traction ratings. So these are probably the best that I could find. I have nice proper date codes here, 1222. So yeah, these should last a pretty good long time. These were some of the highest rated that I could find. I mean, there's only a couple brands, kind of no-name brands, but that's what we got here. So anyway, excited to put these on. So when I took these original ones off, I noticed that there's some pretty severe uneven tire wear happening. I don't know if you can tell right there. This is really, really worn right here. This is off the left front, and this is the right front. Both of the fronts, because the backs are nice and square. These are actually looking almost like new, except the fact that they're about 8 years old and starting to dry rot. Other than that, they look okay. But anyway, we're going to be replacing all of them. But yeah, this severe tire wear here. So that's negative camber, is what that is. So what we're going to do is get ourselves some camber bolts. And we'll put a new one in. I'll go over that as we get there. But that will basically bring this back into spec. So here's what our wheels are looking like with our new tires installed. So these came out pretty nicely. One interesting thing that the tire shop did is they actually put the weights on the inside here, on the inside of the rim instead of the outside. So what that gains us is a nice, cleaner profile here. We should be able to touch up, paint this a little bit. Should be able to get that. This is where one of the old weights was at. We should be able to scrub that off and get that nice and clean. We'll have just a more cleaner profile. So I think that should look pretty nice here. Just a little bit cleaner. And these are about $22 a piece to do, each one, just for the mounting and balancing. And now we're going to focus on the front alignment here. So in this particular case, we have a toe or a negative camber situation happening, in which the whole inside of the tires are wearing faster than the outside. That means that the whole wheel is tilted inwards at the top or outwards on the bottom. So how we're going to correct that is, this car has a typical McPherson strut suspension, very common suspension since the 80s. Or even the 70s actually, and moving forward, they're still using it today, even in the 2020s. So it's a very common, very typical suspension. So although it's technically not adjustable, there is a way to do it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to be using these guys right here. These are called camber bolts, very commonly available, and it's going to fix our problem here. And so basically what it is it's an offset bolt. It's a little bit smaller than the factory size. The factory one is 17, this one's 15, but it has this little offset lobe right here, kind of like a camshaft lobe. It has this offset piece right here. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to start from, if it's top center or if it's bottom center, it's basically neutral at that point. So it allows us to go in, and then if we tilt it so that the lobe is sticking out, what it does is it pushes the spindle outwards. And if we have it pushing the other direction, where it's inwards, it pushes the spindle the other direction. So in this particular case, we want this whole spinner, this whole lower assembly here to go outwards. That will compensate for the negative camber. Also, as we do this procedure, the toe will go out of alignment as well, because the relationship of this to that is going to change. So it's going to create a toe out situation, but we'll come back and fix that later. So right here you can see the differences. This is the original bolt. Although I don't believe this is an original bolt to the car, because it looks too nice. It's too clean to be on coming off of a 30-year-old car. So I think this was replaced, I assume, with an original equipment bolt. But anyway, this is what you can see for comparison. We got a 17 millimeter here, and this is a 15 with the little lobe sticking in there. So we're able to just barely stick this in. It will just barely fit in there with that lobe sticking out. as you can see right there. Just need to tap that in a little bit more. And then what that allows us to do is, because that the nut itself is smaller, as you can see on this side, we'll be able to simply push the spindle out without having to adjust the nut. We'll be able to just simply push this out a little bit right here. We got our pry bar right here, so we'll be able to simply just push that out a bit. And that should get us pretty close to where we need to be. Like I said, we're going to kind of eyeball it here. Probably start somewhere in the middle a little bit, and then we'll adjust it as necessary when we put the car back down on the ground. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this done, and then go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so here it is fully installed now. Now sometimes the washers fit, sometimes they don't. I think it depends on how big it depends on the type of opening that the strut has on it. Like if it has a really big opening, this will fill the gap. But if it's tight, like this one was relatively the same size as the bolt, so there really wasn't much room to work with that. That's happened before on other cars. It doesn't matter. As long as it's tight fitting when you put it in and you're able to adjust it, that's all that really matters. It's only if you have a really large mounting bracket, then you use this. So a lot of times you don't need this. And so yeah, anyway, that's what we got right there. And I know that I've adjusted it because I marked my pry bar up here, and I know that it's moved. They can barely tell the marks that I put right there. You can barely tell it. It doesn't have to move very much. I mean, it's just a millimeter or two at the most will probably get us in alignment. So anyway, I think we've moved it about a millimeter or two approximately. What I've done is I've marked it. These vary from company to company. This is a more generic one, so it doesn't have as many markings as some of the higher end stuff. So like what I've had to do is I marked with a little red line there. Did the same on this one, and that just lets me know where it's flat at. So that's the flat spot right there. So I know that if I adjust it that direction, if I turn it clockwise in this case, the lobe will push out and thus create more, or I guess I should say less camber, which is what we want. We want to get it closer to 0. And so I know that just based off of that I started with it basically flush like so, and then I turned it a little bit as I tightened it down, and that's where we're at right now. So I think that's enough to do it. We'll see. But if we need to, we can go all the way with a red line goes full pointing inwards. That would be full camber out at that point. So anyway, looks pretty good. We tightened this down to 80 foot-pounds. Okay, so we went ahead and did the right side, and we went ahead and adjusted it about the same amount, and then we lowered the car down. Well, we put our wheels on, of course, and then we lowered it down, and we checked it, and the right side looked good. I guess it wasn't out as much as the left, but the left side here is still a little bit out. And so now what we've done is we've gone back in here, and what I've done here, I find to be a good technique on this car, is I'm using a pry bar here, and so I have marks on it. So the original lower mark was the original position. The second mark is where it was when we started, and now I've made an adjustment here. So now the red mark is pretty much gone now. What we've done here is we've moved that from about the 8th turn up to about a whole quarter turn now. That seems to have gotten us up a little notch there. So I think that's going to get us pretty close to being dialed in here. So this seems to be working pretty good here. So anyway, that's basically the technique. Just do it a couple times. Sooner or later you're going to get it right. And from there, once you get it adjusted, it should be good. You shouldn't have to worry about it for years, many years of driving. What we'll do is once we get this one fixed on both sides, we'll come back and we'll do a string alignment and do a check on it to get the toe. We should be able to adjust the toe right here. This is how we would do it. But that will be once the car is back down on the ground with all 4 wheels touching.